Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are starting this seminar, and I'd like to welcome the participants from Haripur also. The topic is one of great importance for economics. ये थोड़ी देर फंसता है. ये स्लाइड मूव नहीं करती थोड़ी देर के लिए. अच्छा, ठीक है. ओके. अच्छा. So the question is, first of all, why are we studying this invisible hand? And in fact, why do we want to fight against the invisible hand, which is what I want to do in this paper. So, as everybody knows, there is a huge amount of inequality and injustice in this world. The top 100 people at this time have more wealth than the bottom billion, or in fact I think it's bottom 3 billion now. This number has been changing rapidly over the past 30 years as the concentration of wealth in the hands of the very small elite has increased to historical maximum. It is now at inequalities at levels which were seen only in the Roman times, when the few very wealthy people had huge amounts of money and most people were slaves. So, billions of people are starving and hungry, when it is not the case that there is not enough money to feed them. The money is there, but it is not in the hands of the people who need it. Who need it. So, and furthermore, the call is being made all over the world that what we need is economic growth to feed the poor, whereas this is completely not true, in the sense that at this time there is enough resources without any further growth to feed everybody on the planet. But the attention is focused on the wrong ideas, and this is done deliberately. So now the system that is working is very harmful. It is very harmful. We see the harms of it every day in Pakistan, all over the world, where huge numbers of people are living miserable lives because they don't have enough access to economic resources. So the question that is natural to ask is, why is this? Why is this state of affairs, and what can be done to change this? So, of course, there are many dimensions, many reasons, but one important reason is that there are many economic myths which people believe, and these myths help to sustain the system. And one of these important myths is the myth of the invisible hand. We learned these myths in our economics courses, and we repeat these myths to others, and we teach these myths to new students. And these make us part of the system, and they also give us some responsibility for the current problems that the world is facing. That is, by accepting these theories, we become part of the system, and we help in propagating the system and creating this injustice and inequality. So, as I said, actually there are many components, and this is of course not the only thing that needs to be done, but this is one important part of the thing. What is the invisible hand? Well, the invisible hand says that if we just don't interfere in the marketplace, then everything will just come out perfectly, all by itself. So the market will be guided as if by an invisible hand to achieve the best possible outcome. So what is the meaning if we believe in the invisible hand? it means that we shouldn't interfere with the system. So if the system is producing good results, then that's fine. But as I've said, the system is producing very bad results. So if we say that we shouldn't interfere with it, this is obviously a way to prevent us from changing the system. Also, the economic theory that we study says that if we actually do interfere, we will end up harming things. We will cause damage. We will make the economic outcomes worse instead of better. Also, it means that there is nothing we can do. People, as I have written in the article, when I went to the university, Stanford, all of my fellow students, thought that we were studying economics so that we could make the world a better place. We could eliminate poverty, help the poor, and so on. But we were trained to understand that everything will work all by itself, and all you need to do is to prevent government from interfering. And the main problem, the reason that we see all the problem in the world is because the government interferes with the workings of the free market, and that's what causes problems. If we just stopped doing anything, automatically everything would become good. So this again, this taught us, and we learned to believe that we don't need to do anything. Again, these are all very harmful messages, because actually the goal of this paper is to say that we do need to do a lot of things. The invisible hand doesn't work as advertised, and so on. So I have just copied two paragraphs from Mankiw and Taylor, which is a very famous textbook, and these paragraphs state the principle of invisible hand, which is being propagated not just by Mankiw, but it's in nearly all conventional economic texts. All of the students of economics in Pakistan are learning this message, which is completely wrong. And what is this message? It says basically that Adam Smith made the most famous observation in all of economics, that households and firms interacting in markets act as if they are guided by an invisible hand that leads them to desirable market outcomes, and it maximizes the welfare of the society as a whole. So one thing that we are saying is that if we just let households and firms interact all by themselves, don't make any rules, don't make any restrictions, don't set quotas, don't set minimum wages, don't interfere with the market, then automatically everything will go good and the welfare of the society will be maximized. And then he goes on to say in the next paragraph, why is it that decentralized market economies work well? Here the decentralized is a very important keyword. It means that the government is not interfering. The centralization refers to the idea that the government can interfere. It can say that don't do this, don't do that. It can make quality standards. It can do many things. That it can provide education. It can provide health services. All of these things the market economy doesn't do. And the market economy says that no, if you need health services, the government shouldn't provide it. It should be left to the market. If you can buy it, then you should get a treatment. If you can't, you should die. That's what the invisible hand says. So it says that so first of all, the first paragraph says that decentralized economies work very well. This is false actually, but this is being said and it is widely believed. Now, why do they work well? Is it because people can be counted to treat each other with love and kindness? Not at all. It is because the participants are motivated by self-interest. And automatically, if everybody acts selfishly, the invisible hand will cause this to create good outcomes for the market. Many of the insights of invisible hand theory remain at the center of modern economics. This is Mankiw, who is, of course, a well-known author, and everybody who's in economics knows that his textbooks are used all over the world. So what he is saying is that invisible hand theory is central to modern economics, And what he is saying here is that we don't need to have love and kindness for each other. We just need to be selfish. If everybody is selfish, everything will automatically work very well. This is all completely false. It's poisonous theory. It's very harmful to mankind. And yet it is widely believed because it is being taught. So we need to counteract this. So in this paragraph, there are 4 claims which are being made. And this paper that I am presenting here just proves that these 4 claims are all wrong. So the first one, these are not listed in the order that they are made, but the first one is, which I call self-interest or selfishness, is that everyone does actually pursue self-interest, that everyone acts selfishly, and also that everyone should act selfishly. The second claim is that is about free markets, that free markets works wonderfully and it promotes the welfare of the society as a whole. And the third claim is greed is good, that we don't need love and kindness. Self-interest works better than love and kindness in terms of promoting social welfare. And the fourth claim is that Adam Smith said all of these things. It's the Adam Smith's principle of the invisible hand. So all 4 of these things are wrong. So let's come to the first one. Is it really true that people always act selfishly? Well, it's not true. I mean, if you just think about your own self, do you always act selfishly? Of course not. We do lots of things for others. We do lots of things which are actually we don't want to do, but because social norms are such that they require us to do it, so we do it. I mean, we don't feel. In fact, one of the most striking examples is that there was a study done at for kidney transplant, SUIT, Sindh Urological Institute, and what they studied, why do people contribute kidneys? So most people do it out of a sense of duty, that my brother is sick, my wife is sick, and she needs a kidney, and I really don't want to do this, but what can I do? It's a social obligation. So those are people. These people are not acting selfishly, and all over time. I mean, if everybody acted selfishly, this world wouldn't be worth living in. We see all the time people acting kindly and people acting for others. So obviously it's not true as an empirical. What is true is that social norms govern human behavior. It is how people behave in the society. If we are taught that we have to be generous, we have to be kind, we have to, when the guest comes in, we have to treat him kindly, even though it may not be it may not be selfishly the best thing. We may be doing something which is very much fun, but somebody comes in and now we say stop doing that, and we entertain our guests. So basically it's an issue of social norms. If the norms are such that in the society selfish behavior is acceptable, then people act selfishly. For example, in the USA, people are taught from an early age that everybody acts selfishly. So children are told that you have to go and do the dishes, and then they are paid for doing the dishes after food, so that everybody acts selfishly. So they act for the pay instead of acting because this is in a family, everyone must do things together. That's a different way of thinking that leads to different social norms. So depending on how we train our children, we can train them to be selfish, we can train them to be cooperative and generous. There is no built-in nature involved here. Now, when we look at actual experiments that have been done, the prisoner's dilemma is a very well-known game which is used to test cooperation. And it is in this game, it can be played as a two-player game or multiplayer game. If people cooperate with each other, then everybody gets a good outcome. But if somebody plays selfishly, then by betraying others, he can cause damage to others but improve his own outcome. So, there is a cooperation strategy which leads to relatively good outcomes for everybody, but not the best possible outcome. And then there is the selfish strategy, which can lead to the best possible outcome for you at the expense of the other people. So, now according to economic theory, nobody should cooperate in this game, because everybody should go for his own personal, individual best. But when we actually play this game in real life, we find that people cooperate a lot. But it is also true that the experiments are quite mixed. You can get the people to betray by many means, and you can get the people to cooperate by many means. So, what it shows is that the economic theory model is not correct. It is possible in some situations that people will behave selfishly and will ignore, and it is also possible that people will cooperate. It depends on many factors, which we all know actually. And if we studied what are the situations, for example, if you have a prisoner, if you just introduce the people to each other, they will start cooperating. If you don't introduce them, and if you tell them that, in this game everybody actually maximizes their own interest, if you teach them the economic theory of that game, then they will play according to the economic theory. They will ignore what is. So actually there is a study which shows that economists are more selfish because they are taught that everyone should be selfish, and that is good. So there are actually papers on this topic, how if you put this game in a group of economists, everybody plays selfishly. If you take a group of chemists or biologists or others, they cooperate. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we say that everybody is selfish, then people will tend to act selfishly. Trust. Now, this is again a situation which, according to economists, nobody should trust others. And it has been found that trust is vital to economic growth. It serves as a lubricant in society. Basically, when I buy something from a stranger, I trust him to provide me with the right good. It's not that. And if there is widespread trust, it does it improves and enhances economic growth. And if the trust is less, it causes a decline in economic growth. And if you study what has been happening in the USA and Europe, trust has been declining slowly, because since the Reagan-Thatcher era, the free market economics has gained the upper hand. Until that time, free market economics was not the dominant ideology. And the dominant ideology over basically 50 years since the Great Depression, the dominant ideology included cooperation and trust and all of these things. But with the coming of Reagan and Thatcher, there was a change in the paradigms, and the Keynesian economics was booted out, and Milton Friedman's Chicago-style economics became dominant, and Chicago-style economics, ruthless competition and perfect individualism, and all of these things are. And so, as a result of this, when people start pursuing self-interest, then obviously you can't trust them. And in fact, the theory of games says that you can trust the person only if the action, it's called the theory of self-enforcing contracts, where a person will always do what is best for him. And if that happens to be what the agreement is, then you can count on him to agree to carry out his agreement. But if his best action involves betrayal, then you can count on him to betray and violate the contract. Again, this is contrary to actual human behavior. Generosity, again, economic theory says that there is no such thing, but observation of human behavior says that there is a lot of generosity, and you can increase it by taking appropriate actions. It depends on social norms, but even everywhere in the world, even in the most selfish places, people do act generously. There is a well-known game called the ultimatum game, in which and there's a variant which is called the dictator game, in which what happens is that a pile of money is placed between two people, and one person is asked that it's up to you. You can take the whole thing, or you can split it half and half with the other person. Whatever you decide, that will be done. So according to economic theory, everybody should always take everything and leave nothing for the other person. But virtually nobody does that. You can say that only 1% of the people are economists. 99% of the people leave something. Sometimes only a token amount. They will, if there's 100 rupees, they will leave 1 rupee. But nobody wants to be thought of as being. And many people, the vast majority, split it 50-50, even though there is no compulsion on them to do so. So, generosity is observed widely, and that's a good thing, because if everybody was selfish, again, this world would not be a good place to live in. Also, there is reciprocity in gift exchange. Again, according to economic theory, the right way to motivate workers is that if they do a lot of work, you give them a bonus, and if they don't do work, you penalize them. And the whole theory of incentives and huge amount of literature is devoted to devising optimal contracts, how you can get the maximum amount of work out of workers by suitable structure of penalties and rewards. But the experiments show a very surprising thing, surprising to economists, but not to the rest of the world, which is that if you trust people, if you call an employee and say, look, I think you're a great man and I trust you, we need a lot of hard work done this work, and here I'm giving you in advance the money that is your bonus for this month, and I expect you to do extra work because we need additional work this month. And that's it. So according to economic theory, what will happen is that he will take the money and he will not do any work because the work is additional effort. But according to reality, what happens is that people respond to this much more and provide much more work effort than if we say, okay, I'm going to watch you this month, and if you produce additional work, I'm going to pay you, and if you go less than, then I will punish you. So this sort of incentive-compatible contract, which is recommended by economists, doesn't work very well. People resent that because it shows that there is a lack of trust, and people do a lot of things to try to get the money, but not actually. They will slack on the quality, the good produce, and they will cheat without while not letting you find out. There will lots of bad things will happen because basically you say, I'm going to catch you and punish you, or I'm going to reward you. So they say, okay, catch me if you can. Instead of if you say, I trust you, and I'm not going to look at what you're going to do. I know that you will put in your best effort. So contrary to economic theory, the second type of contract works very well, and the first one does not. So, as we have said, the first claim of Mankiw is wrong. Self-interest is not how people behave, and is not how people should behave, and it does not lead to the best outcomes. According to Mankiw, free markets lead to best outcomes, but actually there is a lot of empirical evidence that this is not true. Markets were very free in the 1920s. Everybody was allowed to do whatever they wanted. This led to the roaring 20s, which led to a lot of prosperity all around. But in 1929, it all collapsed. There was a Great Depression, which caused misery to millions of lives. Lots of people lost their homes, their houses, their lifetime savings, and there was widespread starvation and hunger, and a lot of bad things happened. Following the Great Depression, there was regulation. A lot of restraints were put on the free markets, mainly on the financial side. The banks were prevented from competing with each other. They were prevented from offering high interest rates. They were prevented from investing in stock markets. Lots of regulations were made, and these regulations led to prosperity in the banking industry for 50 years until the Reagan-Thatcher era, when they were relaxed, and again the relaxation again led to collapses. So in Chile, under General Pinochet, the market was made as free. Milton Friedman went there as an advisor, and all of his advice was followed to the letter. He said, okay, let everybody be free, let them do whatever they want. And what happened was disaster. Unemployment remained high, inflation went high, growth rates were low, everything turned out very poorly. Similarly in Russia, under Gorbachev, they were planning, Russia was communist economy, they were planning to make a gradual conversion to a free market economy, but IMF team went in there with Jeffrey Sachs and says that what we'll do is we'll do shock treatment. We will just we'll just drop all of the planning, drop all of the government rules and just let the free market operate, and it will lead to a miracle. Automatically things will be wonderful. So what happened was that they did that. Why did they do that? It was forced upon them. I mean, IMF said that either you follow this shock strategy and then we will provide you a lot of support and funds and everything, or if you don't, then we will isolate you and ostracize you and will cause you economic problems. So this was, and I think they also created a coup in Russia to support their cause. Yeltsin was, in fact, I think Gorbachev didn't want this and Yeltsin wanted it, so he was allowed to, in fact, he was promised that, okay, we will let you come to power if you implement the free market. So, when they did, what happened was exactly the opposite of what the free market, what the invisible hand predicts. The economy of Russia collapsed. The output was reduced by 50%. I mean, if they were producing 100, it went to 50. Starvation and hunger appeared in an economy in which everybody was eating. And a small number of billionaires also came up. And this is what's a process which has been happening all over in the free markets, that the free markets create wealth, but only in the hands of a very few. In the Reagan-Thatcher era, there was deregulation of the banks. That led to the savings and loan crisis in the 80s, which was of such huge magnitude that it would have led to another depression. But at that time, the government bailed out the banks, so I think about $80 billion was given to the banks to prevent the collapse. And this money was paid for by the American taxpayers. So again, the point is that free market didn't work. When the market was regulated, it was working. When the regulations were taken off, then the crisis occurred. The same thing happened in East Asia. East Asia had a protected capital market. They did not allow foreign investors in. This is against the free market principles. So again, the USA and the IMF forced them to open up their markets. They said that if you open up the markets, we will give you all sorts of credits and bonuses, and if you don't, then we will punish you. So they opened up the markets. Millions of dollars flowed into East Asia. This led to an asset price bubble. Stock market got inflated, real estate got inflated, and lots of money was flowing in, and there was really nothing to buy. So just an inflation occurred, and then there was some disturbance, and suddenly all of this hot money just fled the market, leading to an economic collapse. The same thing happened in the USA when a huge amount, for reasons which are complicated, there was a huge excess demand for dollars. And people started buying dollar-denominated assets. All of these dollars piled up in the US, and they were used to purchase mortgages. So suddenly there was a huge amount of trillions of dollars available to people to buy houses. So this led to a huge rise in housing prices, an asset price bubble in prices, and ultimately a collapse of the mortgage when this bubble burst. When this bubble burst, then the housing prices collapsed, and people who had mortgages, who owned houses, were suddenly unable to afford them. And so there was a huge amount of, and currently because of that, there is, in America, homelessness and hunger are at the highest levels since World War II. So even though the global financial crisis is over, the Great Recession, as they are calling it now, to parallel with the Great Depression, is continuing. Unemployment is at 15% and highest rates ever seen, and again homelessness and hunger at record levels. These are just the big failures of the free markets. There have been over 100 smaller monetary crises which can all be attributed to free markets and would not have occurred if there was regulation. So again, the basic idea that free markets work very well is simply wrong. And is greed good? Well, basically, in the early 20th century, Keynes said that greed is not good, but if we allow greed to operate, it will lead to an accumulation of wealth. And wealth will trickle down to everybody, so everybody will be made better off. So what we should do, he said, and many people agreed with him, greed is a very powerful force. So normally in human societies we teach our children not to be greedy, and we try to suppress this force. He said, don't suppress it, let it go free, and wealth will accumulate, everybody will have lots of money, and then everybody can be generous and kind and compassionate, because the problems are caused by lack of money. So this was the theory which led to the uncorking of the gin of greed in the 20th century. Unfortunately, the results were not as Keynes had anticipated. What happens is that, what we have observed, is that the trickle-down part doesn't happen. Greed does lead to accumulation of wealth, but only in the hands of a very small number of people. And over the past century, if you watch what's been happening, greed led to the Great Depression. After the Great Depression, there was regulation, and income distributions became better for about half a century. Then the best point was reached just around 1970s, late 70s, 80s. And then again, the Reagan-Thatcher era of free market capitalism started, and this was accelerated by the fall of Russia. And then from that time on, the incomes have been becoming more and more concentrated. Over the top 0.1% is getting wealthier, everybody else is getting poorer. Recent statistics show that in the USA, for the first time in 100 years, the middle class position has become actually worse off. The poor have been getting poorer for a long time, but now the concentration of wealth is even affecting the middle class, and the upper middle class is not doing as well. It's only the very small top elite which are making great profits. So in this, economists have had a role to play. For example, Lucas, who was a Nobel Prize winner, he said that studying distribution is the most poisonous tendency in economics. We should not study distribution. We should just study growth, because growth leads to great progress, and distribution is irrelevant. And this is completely false. Actually, the whole game is in the distribution these days. All the money is in the hands of the rich. If this money was distributed, a very small amount is needed to end hunger and poverty on the planet. The richest people are now trillionaires, whereas only about $80 billion is needed to end all hunger and provide for basic needs and for basic health and basic education to all people on this planet. This is a very small amount. Some people have calculated that 0.7% of the GDP of the rich countries would be enough to eliminate hunger on the planet. But this distribution issue and why it's not happening has not been studied, because economists don't study it, and more so they say you should not study it. So the effects of greed led to the Great Depression, greed led to the global financial crisis because basically massively deceptive instruments were sold deliberately by the stock market people. They knew that these things are going to collapse, but they were going to make money, and they didn't mind if the other people got hurt in the process. This has led to massive and rising income inequality, which has been documented by many people. And social effects also are very bad. Actually, it turns out, psychologists have been studying it, that greed is actually harmful to the person who is greedy. Because, you see, human beings are social human beings, and we enjoy society, and the sources of maximum amount of happiness are having friends and having love and warmth and mutuality. And a person who is greedy cannot, and selfish, cannot make friends. And therefore, again, this has been studied, there's a lot of unhappiness and a lot of loneliness in these market societies, and this has been increasing. There's a book called Bowling Alone. Bowling used to be a social activity and you enjoy in America, but now more and more people are just going and rolling balls at pins because they have nothing else to do, because they have no friends to enjoy. So life has become worse because of this promotion of greed and selfishness. Studies of the same thing, happiness. What causes happiness? So they have found that generosity actually leads to long-term happiness. Acts of kindness, if you do nice things for others, this leads you to be happy. These are now empirically documented things which our religion tells us has been documented by. So finally, the fourth point, did Adam Smith actually say all of these things? The fact is that this is not true. Adam Smith did not say, although the phrase invisible hand occurs in his book, he did not promote greed. He was actually a professor of moral philosophy. He argued against greed and selfishness in many places, and he approved of generosity and compassion, and he made many policies, suggested many policies which would interfere with free markets to promote interests of the poor and the oppressed. So Adam Smith didn't say this, but everybody says that Adam Smith says this. In contrast to the invisible hand, if you look at what have been the success stories in the 20th century, you find everywhere there is a visible hand of planning. It didn't happen automatically by markets working independently. Those led to disaster, but where people got together and planned and thought about how we can do things better, they got good results. East Asian success was due to planning, as has been documented by the World Bank. Crisis management in the when the Great Depression happened, then people got together and asked, why did this happen? And they said, well, it was free market excesses. And they put a lot of blocks on free market activities, and that led to prosperity. Similarly, East Asian crisis, the reforms after that the ones that recovered fastest were the ones that didn't follow the free market prescriptions. So now the question arises, given that it's actually not difficult to show that all of these four things that Mankiw is saying are wrong, it's not difficult at all to show that greed is harmful, to show that free markets are leading to disaster, why is it continues to be the leading theory among economists? So basically, recent studies show that there's a lot of fraud and deception that is required to maintain the current power structures. Currently, the economic theories that we have, if we follow them, will lead to have led to wealth becoming concentrated in the hands of the top 0.1%. And if we just continue laissez-faire, which is what the invisible hand says, just don't do anything, this will continue to happen, and more poor people will become poor and homeless, and more and more billionaires are being created every day. This is not the right thing to do. We should not allow more and more people to become billionaires at the same time when more and more people are starving. But if we just let things go as they are, then this will happen. So now what happens is that the rich rule democracies. Everybody is deceived by the idea that the US is a democracy, one man, one vote. But actually, political scientists who have studied the system have shown that in any decision in which the interests of the rich and the powerful are one and the interests of the poor are different, the policy which gets made is the one which the rich favor and not which the 99% of the population favors. How did this happen? Well, in a democracy, it happens by making the poor believe the wrong theories so that they vote against their own interest. One very clear example, and there are many examples, like the health programs, the idea, the socialized medicine, which is the case in Canada. In Canada, every person can get very good medical treatment at about 1/4 the cost of what they can in the USA. In the USA, the costs of medical treatment about 4 times as high as that in Canada, and the majority of the population does not have access to health services at this time. Because they can't afford insurance. And Obama came in with the proposition that I will introduce socialized medicine. The propaganda was so heavy that the poor were made to believe that this would be very harmful to them, even though it would have been very favorable for them. So basically, deceiving the poor about their interests is a very important part of how democracies work. Post-GFC, global financial crisis, the most amazing thing happened. Everybody understood why was the global financial crisis caused? Because the house price collapsed and people who had mortgages could not make payments. So what's the natural solution? Well, provide some relief to the mortgages. This was proposed that, many houses were underwater. Even now, 20% of the houses are underwater. What means underwater is that the amount of the loan that you owe on the house is more than the price of the house. So if you sell the house, you cannot get the money to repay your loan. This happened because of the asset price collapse. So the natural thing to do is to have some debt forgiveness, reduce the loan. As Mia and Sufi have shown, this would have worked. This would have prevented the recession from happening. This would have, the unemployment would not have been there, and the other major problems that the economy is facing would not have been there if the money had been given to the people who were losing homes. And this is of course natural. Everybody can understand this. If there is a knife and it makes a wound, then you should apply medicine to the wound. Obviously. What happened instead was that $1 trillion bailout was given to the bankers who were the cause of this crisis. Just like applying medicine to the knife instead of the wound. Now, how did this happen? I mean, it's really amazing. It was because the rich and the famous the rich and the powerful managed to make the people believe that the system depends on the banks and the financial institutions, even though this is not true. And if we let the financial institutions collapse, the whole economy will collapse and everybody will suffer. Just like, they went to Iraq because, created war in Iraq because they said if we don't, then the Saddam Hussein is going to send atom bombs to us because he has these weapons of mass destruction which didn't exist. So by frightening, this is actually something which goes back to Machiavelli. He said that if you want to make people, you want to push unpopular policies, you have to scare them. You have to make them frightened of something. And if there is nothing frightening, you create a monster. So actually, currently, the monster of Islam has been created. It's the biggest enemy to the civilization currently. The mad mullahs are the ones who are going to destroy the world. And so everything has to be done to combat this crisis, and no matter what's happening to whether you are hungry or losing homeless, this is such a big threat that we have to fight it on all fronts. So, post GFC, a lot of people proposed a lot of legislation, just like post global Great Depression. A lot of legislation was passed to prevent the banks from doing those things which had caused the Great Depression. Same thing happened post GFC, but what is important for us to understand is that this time it was not successful. All of the legislation which was done to reduce the ability of banks to gamble was successfully blocked in the Congress. So at this time, many people, analysts have said that the next crisis is just a matter of time because we have done nothing to prevent it, even though all the causes are there. So basically what has happened is that the resistance has been crushed in the wealthy nations. The 0.1% is firmly in control of government. There used to be talk of regulatory capture, where the big monopolies would get out of control and they would capture those people who were trying to regulate them, because they were big and the regulation agency is small and underpaid. Now what has happened is much worse. The government capture has taken place. The US government is not now in the hands of the people, but it is in the hands of the small military-industrial complex, which is making huge fortunes at the expense of everybody else, everybody on the planet, including the American people, including the rest of us. Now, as I am, my own view is that nothing can be done in the West, but we have an option open here. Our capitalists have not seized control of the government, so it is possible for us to resist. And one of the important steps is to learn the right economic theories, and that is what this lecture was about. So I'll end here. Thank you. Yes, questions?
Thank you. Sarji, आखिर में, you told that idea is that we should understand what is wrong.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Almost we have understood that things are going wrong, and the whole philosophy is based on lie.
Yeah.
Completely lie, and we are part of that.
Yes.
That means that we are spreading lie.
Yes.
आपने साथ ये भी कहा कि हमें नीड है कि हम अल्टरनेट. अब मैं अभी जाके मैं क्लास में प्रेसिडेंट डिलेमा पढ़ाना है.
Exactly.
और 2 players और 10 players वाला.
Yes.
और एग्जैक्टली यही बनाना है कि कॉमन नॉलेज और रैशनैलिटी को अज्यूम करते हैं. व्हाट इज द आंसर? Of course, I'm teaching that you should be selfish. सर जी मसला है कि what is alternative? At least सर पहली वैसे कि alternative जब तक books text नहीं available होंगी तो हम क्या करें? This is the question.
Very good question. To take it on the micro level, when you are teaching Prisoner's Dilemma, you should teach that this is not how actually people behave, and furthermore, it is not good for them to behave in this way. And so economic theory makes the wrong prediction, both normatively and empirically. Economic theory says empirically people behave selfishly, and normatively that this is the best behavior for everybody. Both of these propositions are wrong. Normatively they should not behave selfishly, and empirically the people do not behave selfishly. So at least that is one thing you can say in your class, and there is now enough evidence. The other thing, yes, there is a massive effort that is needed to rewrite the economics textbooks. This is currently being done all over the place. Even in the West, people have realized it, and there are many projects that are going on to repair the damage that is being caused by economic theories. In this project, there is also very important to understand that some people, and in fact that's where the majority is, people are trying to modify economic theory without without trying to create a revolution. They just want the system to persist. But the failure of economic theory is so obvious to all that they want to patch it up, and without actually changing the system. And this is actually where the majority is currently. There are many efforts going on. There's INET, and there are other organizations who say, yes, economics has failed us, let us build a better economics. But the better economics is going to do exactly the same thing that the worse economics used to do. Indeed, this is exactly what happened, when IMF and World Bank in 90s, they became very infamous. There was a huge movement that the structural adjustment programs are causing poverty and harm and damage all over the world. So they said, okay, now we're going to look at sustainable growth, and we're going to have poverty programs, poverty alleviation programs, and we're going to make this an essential aspect. But when you look closely, you find that nothing has changed. This was just window dressing. They were mentioning poverty, but they didn't. When you look closely at the program, they said, what we're going to do is we're going to have growth, and growth will automatically eliminate poverty, which is exactly the same as what they were saying earlier. But now, previously, where they hadn't highlighted poverty, they were using the name, and they were putting in some tokens, just like, if organization is accused of being racist, they hire a few token Negroes to prevent them from being accused of this. So just like this, there are efforts being made to reform the economics curriculum. Some of them are genuine, most of them are frauds. So we have to revolutionize the curriculum, but we have to also do it correctly. And doing it correctly involves challenging existing power structures, so it's not going to be easy. The money is being put into funding alternatives to economics, which will be tame alternatives, which will be your pet house theory, which will continue the existing inequality and oppression. So it's a battle. It has always been a battle for good and evil, and this is the same battle continues today. Yes.
You just mentioned the case of Russia that the IMF told them to move to free market economy. My question was why they were not told to make a gradual move towards
yes.
this economy, and
the gradual move would have been very much better for them,
exactly.
But the multinationals were very eager to go in after the resources. That Russia had tremendous amount of natural resources, and they just wanted to get their hands on it. And so they were made instantly billionaires, whereas a gradual move would not have allowed them.
Political reasons were also involved because that was the time when there was this Cold War existing between America and Russia.
Yeah.
So that can also be a reason that they just pushed them to move towards free market economy.
I think that was not the case, in the sense that the gradual move was accepted by all. Russia was ready to move gradually. They had announced that we are going to move gradually towards free market. So if the main issue was the greedy multinationals, and they created billionaires out of nothing in a very short period of time. If they had moved gradually, this would have restrained their profit-making abilities, and that was the main reason for the shock therapy. Otherwise, the Cold War would have been explained, move to free markets, but they were already ready and to do that, so that gradual move would have been worked just fine. Yes?
It's a very interesting presentation, and as far as the pillars of things in your hand, you have cleared a lot of very important issues. A big query about this free market that, for example, if we study economics, the microeconomics, they teach us, though it's a monopolist kind of market structure where, they try to maximize their profit. But there's also the role of the government to some extent, where it comes and plays its role as a social planner. And from that perspective, regulations comes in, the regulatory authorities, and so on and so forth. And that's in the United States, and that has also been followed in very good countries like Pakistan as well. In certain, for example, doctor and so on and so forth. My second concern is regarding the benefits of economic growth. When, of course, you have said very rightly that the trickle-down effects actually did not pass on, as they were expected. But if you take the example of China, especially in the last 2 decades, you will see that many people have been brought out of poverty trap, and that's all. That's been credit has been given to the high economic growth, and so that's also one. And you are right that to some extent, structural adjustment program of the World Bank is not a success story. But in some countries, they have carried out the studies or the projects where they have seen that to some extent these have been successful in some part of the world, not as they were expected at large. But there are some success stories as well where the transparency was there and the monitoring systems were well in place. There it has been successful to some extent, but overall the situation you said is not has not been very promising. So this is kind of my concern with reference to the regulation.
So you made 3 points, and let me answer them quickly. First was the regulation. Economic theory says that we should regulate externalities, we should regulate monopolies, and so on. Now, what has been happening in the USA academia, they have started arguing that we should not regulate monopolies, and you should not. This has become part of theory which was coming out of Chicago School, and just recently, policy that is implemented by certain government bureaus. In the past, when the Keynesian theories were dominant, government was very active in anti-monopoly legislation. These days, the same agency, if somebody brings a suit against monopoly, they just ignore it. And so it's just a question of who is in charge, and the neoliberals have placed those people in charge who support their policies. So, in fact, the Congress passed an act to relieve the mortgages, but the agency that was in charge, the head of it, did not basically made it ineffective. The money was never used and basically returned, even though he could have done a lot. In fact, Atif Mia and Amir Sufi have written House Debt, how much difference it could have made, but that one person blocked the legislation. So regulations, economic theory can be used to support some good ideas as well, but the way the power structures are being used, that they use those theories which are favorable to them and ignore those parts which are not favorable to them. So that's one part. In China, the reason for the removal of poverty has not been free markets as such. It's a very large and complex set of reasons, but it has to do more with a cultural homogeneity and community-driven development has been a very important part of the story. One of the very important strategies of the free marketeers is to capture growth. And for example, they say, look at... and so basically it's the community development that has led to growth. The causal chain is the wrong direction. And what the free markets tiers do is they capture the theory. They say, look, growth in China has occurred and poverty alleviation has occurred, so growth leads to poverty alleviation. When in fact the causal mechanism is exactly the opposite. And this is something which many people have realized. In Pakistan, if we focus on removing poverty, it will increase our growth rate. And then people will say, oh look, growth rate has gone up, poverty has gone down, so obviously growth removes poverty. Whereas in fact the causation is in the opposite direction. And the last point you made was about? Structure. Yeah, there's a book written by the World Bank in 2003 evaluating the experience of the 90s, and they come to the conclusion that it was a big failure.
There are some success stories.
Yes, there are a few success stories everywhere. And in fact, that's very harmful because what happens is that they pick up these and make them as in fact, they project the program to be a success when in fact it's mainly a failure.
Normally governance issues.
Yeah, like these NGOs, they go and help one widow, and then they say that, okay, we have helped 1,000 people, and here's a poster child, here's a widow that was helped. They don't understand that it's not explained that this is the only widow that they helped, and 99% of the money went to helping the NGO employees, which they're helping themselves, exactly. So, but the projection is large. So just like that, having a few good cases is useful. Just like having a few Negroes in your organization is helpful to prevent you from the charge of racism.